Hi everyone, hope everyone is well. In this video I'm going to go through the player attacking phase element of a turn. Effectively this is combat, and it happens when you have any of your units in a zone with enemy units. And this example here is let's just start with the most basic straightforward example. We've got one British Airborne unit and one enemy German unit in the same zone. And you have to resolve, or you have to go through a round of combat. It's not optional, you have to do it. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to roll 2 dice for the enemy unit. It's always 2 dice. It does help if you have on to hand 3 or 4 dice. You can play the game perfectly well with 2, and you'll see why. You roll the 2 dice, and let's say for the sake of argument, we get a 1 and we get a 4. You're going to pick the highest dice, remove the other one. It's a 4. So the British Airborne unit, now using its attack attribute, has to roll that number of dice based on its attack attribute and get a 4 or more to defeat that unit. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that this unit here has also an attack of 2. That would mean you would roll 2 dice. And let's say you get a 5 and a 3. The 5 beats the 4. That unit is defeated and can be removed from the board. And it's as straightforward as that. Now, if in the same example, if it was a 4 and a 1 for the German, but the British Airborne unit here only had an attack of 1, then you would roll 1 dice. And so it's harder for a counter with a lower attack value to defeat the German in that example. You'd roll the 1 dice. If you get a 4, brilliant. 4 equals the 4, that would be removed. German unit would be removed. You don't need to beat the dice, the highest dice, you just need to equal or beat it. If you do not, then it just stays in play exactly, just keep it as. And then what will happen in the enemy phase, that unit will attack that unit back. But you don't need to worry about that in this phase. In the player combat, and the emphasis is on the player. This is your phase to attack the enemy units that you are in a zone with, and it's it's basically as simple as that. And then what I'll do now, I'll just go through some variations that you may encounter in the game. So in this example, we're going to run exactly the same example: 2 dice for the German, and let's say we get a 4 and a 1. 2 dice for the British, and we get a dreadful die roll, and we get a 1 and a 2. Well, that's all over, right? Well, as a player, you actually have another option. You have, for each scenario, a pool of bravery counters. You can spend 1 counter and re-roll 1 dice. Entirely up to you which dice it is, but in this case, it doesn't particularly matter. So you spend your counter, you re-roll your dice, and you get 5, and brilliant. Beats the 4, that enemy unit is removed. Now let's say in this example we get our original 1 and our 2, we spend a bravery counter, we re-roll the dice, and we get, instead of getting a 2, we get a 1. Oh no, even worse. You can spend another bravery counter. You can keep spending bravery counters to re-roll a single dice as many times as you want. The only limit you have is the limit of bravery points or bravery counters you have in the scenario. And it basically gives you a further option, enables your unit in the narrative of the game to dig deep and defeat the enemy that they encounter. Now, in this next example, the enemy counter has a re-roll counter that's placed underneath it. And this can happen during the game or at the beginning or when you do a setup. How that works is in the player attacking phase, which is what we're talking about in this video. Let's suppose for this counter here, you roll 2 dice and you get a 2 and a 3. Okay, because that enemy unit has a reroll counter, you would re-roll the lowest dice, and we re-roll that and we get a 4. That means its highest dice now is a 4. And then the British unit here, you would roll again the same thing, the number of attacks, and you've now got to try and beat that 4. Basically, what the reroll counter does, it basically means this unit is probably going to be harder to dislodge out of the game. So normally units that have these are at the beginning of the game, where they're in concrete bunkers or watchtowers, that sort of thing. They're just that bit harder to remove out of the game. Okay, now in this example, our British counter here has a disrupted counter. And you get disrupted as a result of combat, but in the German AI phase. But this counter has a disrupted counter. And what that does is it reduces all of its stats down to 1. So in this example, the German, you would roll 2 dice, and let's say we get a 5 and we get a 2. The British counter has an attack of 2, so you would normally roll 2 dice. But because it's disrupted, its attacks are now 1. So you'd only roll the 1 single dice. So as you can see, having disrupted counters on your units is extremely bad. And that's okay, because later in the turn, you can roll to see if you can remove those disrupted. And I'll cover that in a separate video. Okay, and a further example. In this example, you've got 2 enemy units and 1 British unit. It's actually very straightforward. You are going to roll the 2 dice for each of these 2 and record what the results are. So let's say for this one we get a 1 and a 2. You keep the 2. You roll 2 dice for this unit here, and let's say we get a 3 and a 5, so to keep the 5. You would then roll the number of attacks this unit has, and let's say it has 2 attacks. Keep it simple to begin with. You roll your 2 dice, and let's say we get a 2 and we get a 4. Okay, as the player, you have the flexibility to decide which dice of your dice that you rolled can equal or beat the opposing dice. So the 2 beats the 2, that unit is removed. That would be taken off the board. The 4 does not beat the 5, so that would stay. However, if on your dice, let's just tidy this up a little bit. Let's say that was a 5. Let's say you get a 4 and a 5. The 4 would beat the 2, so that could be removed. The 5 can equal the 5, so that can be removed. So you can remove 2 units with your 1 unit in that example. However, if there is an example where, and let's keep the dice the same, but this unit only has 1 attack and you get a 6, you can decide of the 2 units which one to remove. The 6 beats both the 2 die there, but you've only got 1 dice, so you can only remove or equal or better 1 dice. So you could remove either of those 2. Let's say you remove that one, and that's how that works. Now, a further example to that would be, let's say you have 2 units as well. It actually works exactly the same way. Let's keep these die results for the sake of simplicity. And let's suppose this unit has 2 dice. So you'd roll 2 dice and you get a 5 and a 1. Okay, well, you think the 5 is going to beat the 2. That's okay. Would actually also be able to equal that one. And then this unit here has 1 attack and gets a 6. Well, the 6 can then beat that one. So effectively, think of your attacks as a pool of dice. And you have the flexibility to distribute those attacks, your attacks against the enemy, how you want to. And you can use bravery points. And remember if you have a disrupted counter. And remember if the enemy have a reroll counter. It all works exactly the same. And the pace of combat is quite quick, but not too dice chucky. So hopefully that gives you a good overview of how combat works when you are fighting enemy infantry. Now there is an example, further example I want to give. let's suppose you are facing against an armoured fighting vehicle, in this case a half-track. The rulebook will tell you the special rules for each particular vehicle, but let's use an easy example. Now the half-track rolls 3 dice and it retains the highest number. And your attacks are exactly the same as normal. It basically means armoured fighting vehicles are harder to dislodge. So you might have to use several counters to secure, stand more chance against them. However, the British Airborne also had a little handy tool, well, it depends on who you ask, with a Piat. And the Piat gives you an extra dice. So in this particular example, the half track would roll 3 dice. And let's say it gets its highest number is a measly 4. The British Airborne has 2 attacks, an extra 1 for the Piat, and it gets a 5, a 6, and a 5. The Piat's well and truly sorted out. You only need 1 dice. You always only need 1 dice to be able to defeat it. It is defeated. So again, just to run the numbers again a little bit different. Let's say its highest number is a 4, and you get a 1, and a 5. And again, you got the 5. That beats the 4. It's defeated, and it's removed from the game. Hopefully that gives you a good overview of how this phase works. The player phase, the player attacking phase. Remember, there is a different phase for when the enemy will attack you back, and I'll cover that in a separate video. There are a whole bunch of videos on this game, so please check out all those for the different mechanics of the game. Thanks a lot for the support for the project, and thanks a lot for watching, as always. Thank you.